Well, we have been looking for that, and we have more or less only been getting that from the Democratic side in the highest ranking positions. Of course, there are, Republicans like North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis, who's been talking about it in a more peaceful way. But he also pointed out when he had Kash Patel sitting in front of him on Wednesday that, you have Bannon's war room going with the "this is war." You have people talking about the they, right? That they did this to us. We are at war with them, from Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, Patel. This video is just a preview of the full episode, which is available now on our own Raging Moderates YouTube channel. That's where we're bringing you more of the content you want, up-to-the-minute videos and conversations, in addition to the Wednesday and Friday pods, which you've been listening to for a while. You can click the pop-up link now or head over to youtube.com/@RagingModerates to subscribe. Hope you will. Powerful figure, you name them, Benny Johnson. I'm deeply concerned about what that portends for the country. And it seems like they are using that almost immediately as a way to crack down on the left, and that is going to become the mission in all of this.
I had seen J.D. Vance guest host Charlie Kirk's program, and he railed against unity in it. He kept saying, we reject unity with people who do X or people who do Y. And that is the exact opposite of how you're supposed to react. You're supposed to respect people's grief, not by exploiting them, not by trying to turn them against their fellow Americans. I don't think that there are many people who saw that video and whose first reaction was, we need more division. But that is what he was preaching. And if I think back to how President Biden reacted after an assassin tried to take the life of President Trump, he said, we all need to come together. Political violence is always wrong. We all share bonds as Americans that we need to keep front of mind. Or if you think about Barack Obama, after Dylan Roof shot many members of a Black congregation in South Carolina, where he sang Amazing Grace and called for people to come together. And I think that while the news cycle is volatile and many things will happen between now and then, I think that if Vance tries to run in the 2028 cycle, I think that is a very telling moment about what are your real convictions, what are your real values, because it is an insult to every American who has been harmed by political violence, whatever their point of view was, to try and use it to fuel more anger and more division.
Yeah, I mean, not to play I live in conservative media devil's advocate, but the right has a list of things that they say that we in the Democratic Party has done to marginalize and to demean and to demonize the right. And they would say that President Biden, how he called out MAGA Republicans and the MAGA base all the time, was part of the problem. And they've been going back to the radicalization that happened, under Barack Obama. For instance, Megyn Kelly was talking about that. And as someone who served in the Biden administration, how would you respond to those accusations that, these divisions have been fomented for a long time, and that Democrats are guilty as well of demonizing an enormous subsection of the Republican Party?
One of the biggest problems with the way the Trump administration is talking to the country is they are often treating people like they're stupid, and they are not stupid. You see this with the Epstein files, how they were promising for years transparency on the Epstein files. Then once they come into power, you see the opposite, and we still have no idea what is really in those and what is about Trump in them. But I think that Americans are proud of the fact that we are a democracy that values debate. And they understand that there are always going to be contrasts that people who are running for office make with one another and that parties make with one another. But what we need to do is look at the specific rhetoric like you're getting at. Joe Biden would say that he disagreed with MAGA Republicans, as he put it, and he would separate that from what he called mainstream Republicans. And when he was walking through what he found concerning about MAGA Republicans, it was the explicit support for violence, like how on January 6th, there were members of the Capitol Police Force who lost their lives. That mob wanted to kill Mike Pence. They wanted to kill Republican members of Congress. And that goes to the core of what he was talking about, that we have to say that's not who we are. And I remember there was a moment in the 2020 campaign after the turmoil after George Floyd was killed. He would repeatedly say, by he I mean President Biden, we have to always reject political violence. Protest must be peaceful. And there were some voices like DSA in Portland put out a statement condemning Joe Biden for saying that violence is always unacceptable. They had some argument that in some cases it was. And I I couldn't disagree with that more. And I think that if you map out what are people saying about one another, it is hard to argue that what's called for now is the kind of charged rhetoric that you're seeing from the president and the vice president and their allies trying to exploit a tragedy to go after Americans who disagree with their policies. It's literally just about one of the least American things that you can do.
Yeah, and they're getting very serious about it. So we have this $15 billion defamation lawsuit Donald Trump has filed against the New York Times, saying that they're virtually the mouthpiece of the Democratic Party. We had Pam Bondi saying that we can prosecute hate speech. She walked it back, but then, Trump being Trump, he basically said, no, that's actually totally fine. We have Deputy AG Todd Blanche threatening to use RICO against left-wing groups that even disturb the president's meals. Where do you think all of this leads?
I don't think it's leading anywhere good when you look at the way they're acting. Like you said last night, I saw that exchange where Caitlin Collins was interviewing Todd Blanche.
So is it, again, sheer happenstance that individuals show up at a restaurant where the president is trying to enjoy dinner in Washington, D.C., and accost him with vile words and vile anger, and meanwhile he's simply trying to have dinner? Does it mean it's just completely random that they showed up? Maybe, but to the extent that it's part of an organized effort to inflict harm and terror and damage to the United States, there's potential investigations there.
And she reminded him correctly that every American has the right to protest their government. That is fundamental. And every president of our lifetimes has been protested. I don't know of anybody else whose team has tried to say that protesting them should be a crime equal in magnitude to terrorism, organized crime. I think that that's just the kind of thing people hear it, and it makes them concerned about their rights. And their right to be. It made me concerned in that way. I remember there were events where people were chanting, quote, "fuck Joe Biden." Joe Biden did not ever, and nor did anybody on his team, talk about that should be criminalized, that shouldn't be allowed. Americans have the right to do that. I went to protests of President George W. Bush when I was in college because I disagreed with the Iraq War. That is something every American has a fundamental right to do.
Do you see a difference in the way the media is handling the Trump administration versus how they interacted with the Biden administration? I've heard accusations, obviously, of acquiescing in some ways, like CBS paying that $16 million fine, kind of just to get them off their back. And there has been a chilling effect throughout media organizations. What's your take on how they're interacting with the administration?
To me, I think it gets at a double standard that still has to be addressed at a high level in mainstream media. It takes me back to, there was a moment in 2016 when Matt Lauer interviewed Hillary Clinton and then Donald Trump back to back. And there was a very different tone in his questioning of the two of them. With Trump, it was basically like, what is your favorite color balloon? And with Hillary, it was, why did you kill all those people in Benghazi? Right? It was just night and day. And I think that there's been some soul searching in the almost 10 years since that time. But if you take a step back and you diagram out how do they treat Trump in general versus how do they treat whichever Democratic opponent or opponents he is vying with at that time, there is not equal treatment. Trump is given much more regurgitation in coverage, including when he says things that are demonstrably untrue, when he says things that an outlet's own investigative reporting has debunked. I remember there was a New York Times article over the weekend, which goes to the conversation we're having about cracking down on free speech, where